So they just announced balance changes, and I'm a pretty big fan of most of these changes. So today, let's go over all the balance changes and talk about my thoughts on them, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts as well. All right, let's get into it. What's going on, Jam Fam, and welcome back to the gaming station. So like I said, they did just announce balance changes, and I'm going to try to get this video done as quickly as possible. So that means I'm going to be trying to ad-lib most of this video. I did go through, look at the balance changes, and write down all my notes on my thoughts on these balance changes. Quick side note, I did go watch Kairos Time's balance change video, but that was just to clarify some of the numbers specifically, and to clear a couple things up that I wasn't sure on, like, for example, the tank trait and all that. But I didn't let any of his opinions affect my thoughts on these balance changes, so this is all my opinion right here. All right, let's jump into it. All right, we're going to start with the buffs, and the first buff we got is going to be Penny. Penny's getting a 6% HP increase. Now, personally, I think this change is fine, but honestly, I don't think it's the problem with Penny because her HP wasn't really her big issue. I made a video just last week talking about brawlers that need a buff, and in my opinion, Penny's big issue was her damage because she only does like 1,300 damage per shot, which is very low, and she has a very long reload speed, so it's hard to get a lot of damage done with Penny. And everything she offers, other brawlers do better. Like throwers do better area of control and snipers do better damage. So why would you ever need to play Penny if you want to play her for one of those two aspects? So I would have preferred like a damage buff or a reload speed buff or even a supercharge rate buff to get her turret out a little faster. Honestly, I don't think this HP buff is going to do much for her, and I don't think she's going to be viable in this upcoming meta. All right, moving on from Penny, we got Darryl. Darryl's getting a 6% HP buff as well. And I'm honestly okay with this change. I do think Darryl did need some kind of buff because he was struggling a bit in the last meta. Since Darryl already had his auto-charging super, they couldn't give him the same trait that all the other tanks got that's linked to damage. So you weren't able to play him super aggro and get your super very fast like you were with somebody like Primo. And I think this is what pushed Darryl out of the meta. Not necessarily that he was really bad, just that he couldn't keep up with the other tanks. So I think this HP buff is actually going to help Darryl kind of feel like an assassin role a little bit better, kind of like Buzz being like a heavy assassin. So I do think Darryl's going to be better now, and I won't be shocked if we see him in competitive in something like a Poco double tank comp or something like that. All right, moving on from Darryl, our next brawler is going to be Edgar. The healing Edgar gets from his main attack is getting increased from 25% to 35%. Now, I don't know if this change was really needed because Edgar was doing okay in solo showdowns, but he was struggling in 3v3s, so I can understand why they would want to buff him. So between more healing from his main attack and possibly having the shield up from his new gadget, I could see him being a little more tanky and being able to play a little more aggressive from time to time. However, because it still takes Edgar a very long time to charge his super without his first gadget, I think he's still going to struggle in 3v3s. This change might make him better in a mode like Gem Grab, where he can wait for his super, pop his gadget, and then jump on a gem carrier to steal the gems. But other than that, I don't know if this is really going to make him viable in 3v3s. I'd like to see what the pros can do with him before I make like final judgments, but I won't be shocked if he still struggles in 3v3s. All right, the next brawler I want to talk about is Bo. Bo's getting a damage buff by 7%. And honestly, I think this isn't going to change Bo at all. I think he's still going to struggle in the meta because both his gadgets are still very bad and they're not addressing either one of those. Just like Penny, I talked about Bo in my balance change idea video from last week, and after publishing the video, the more I thought about it, gadgets are really what makes brawlers really viable in these new metas. And I think this is Bo's biggest problem because right now Tripwire is absolutely unusable. The 1.5 second delay is way too long and it makes it really hard to get really good value out of it. And they nerf Super Totem into the ground where it's so hard to actually get value from it because you only get so much time to charge supers and you only get 3 per match. So while the damage is nice and Bo might be able to get a couple extra kills here and there, I think Bo's still going to struggle in the long run because gadgets are so crucial to making brawlers viable in the meta. All right, next brawler I want to talk about is going to be Poco. Poco Screeching Solo got a 200 damage buff, and his Protective Tunes got a 1 second buff to the immunity on it. I don't really know how effective the Screeching Solo buff is going to be. I know it's gained a lot of popularity in the last couple of months. A couple people told me I should be playing it, but I still prefer Decapo personally. And a 200 damage buff is nice, but it still only does 1,000 damage, which really isn't a lot, and I'm going to complain about 1,000 damage on another brawler coming up here. So Screeching Solo could be decent, but I could still see Decapo being the preferred star power for Poco, just because it offers so much value from the burst heal that he can provide his team. But as far as Protective Tunes, I still think it's going to be a bad star power personally. Maybe bad's a strong word, but I don't think it's going to be very good because personally, I just think it's too situational to face negative status effects to the point where you want to give up your gadget to use it. You can use it in like Power League when you see that they're playing like a Crow or a Frank, but when you're jumping into ladder, you're going to want to bring Tuning Fork instead. But my other issue with it is that you only get 3 uses in a match, and if you play a brawler like Crow, who's gonna be poisoning you nonstop and gonna be slowing you quite a bit, you're gonna burn through those 3 uses a lot quicker than you really want to. I honestly think it would be nice if they buffed it to 4 or 5 uses. That sounds a little overpowered, but when you consider what this gadget really does, I don't think it's overpowered personally. So I'm a little skeptical about the Poco changes. I could see Screeching Solo being decent, and I don't think Protective Tunes is really gonna be that good. All right, the next brawler I want to talk about is going to be Shelly. They're reworking Shelly's clay pigeon, so now it stays active for 5 seconds, and all shots done within those 5 seconds have that shot pattern. This is an interesting change in my opinion, and it does make her a little less matchup dependent if you run clay pigeons, because if you have clay pigeons now, you're not totally useless if there's no tanks on the other team. Now you can actually try to get some chip damage done at a far distance. However, I have the same issue with this gadget change that I do with Protective Tunes, and that's that you only get 3 uses. So if you do get stuck in one of those longer range matches, you're going to burn through your 3 uses really quick. But overall, I don't think this is really going to help Shelly too much. It's a nice change, but I think people are still going to prefer the dash so they can play a little more aggro once you get Shelly super in hand. All right, I saved the 2 big buffs for the end, and the first one we're going to talk about is Mortis. So first off, they're making Coiled Snake a passive ability for Mortis, and it's going to take 4.5 seconds to charge. Now, that's an extra second than what it is normally. Normally, it's 3.5 seconds, so with this new passive ability, it's going to be 4.5 seconds. However, the star power that currently is Coiled Snake is going to be reworked to take 1.5 seconds off of that charge time, making it only 3 seconds instead of 4.5 seconds. Now, these are really big changes because it makes it so free-to-play players no longer have to max out Mortis to make him viable, because Coiled Snake is what really made Mortis very good. And for players that already have Mortis maxed out and either have both star powers or even just one of them, they're both getting buffs. Because for players who are already running Coiled Snake, it takes 0.5 seconds less to charge the Coiled Snake, so you can get your extra dash a lot quicker. And now players who only have Creepy Harvest unlocked now get Coiled Snake built into Mortis, so they're getting a buff too. And speaking of Creepy Harvest, I actually think that's going to be the preferred star power for most good Mortises. It gives 1800 healing for each kill that you get, which means you can play hyper aggro with Mortis, and if you get a kill, you're almost guaranteed to be able to stay aggro, plus his super also heals him too. I'm a huge fan of these changes. I think Mortis is going to be really good in this upcoming meta, maybe in Gem Grab and Bounty, and my favorite thing is that I think he's going to serve as a very hard counter to Belle in competitive, which should help bring her down a couple pegs as well. All right, and the last buff I want to go over is going to be to Squeak. Squeak was one of the worst brawlers in the game since he came out, and he's getting huge overhauls to his entire kit pretty much. So first off, his projectile speed is going to be buffed by 25%. This is going to make it a lot easier to land his shots and deal damage more consistently. And now they're making it so if you land multiple projectiles on one target, the oldest projectile will explode. And the last change that Squeak's getting is that the big bomb from his super is going to explode as soon as it lands. Honestly, I'm a fan of all these changes. Squeak's biggest issue was that if you didn't land his shots consistently, he didn't really offer too much to a team. So the projectile speed increase addresses that, and the instant detonation on multiple bombs addresses his low DPS, especially when somebody gets in his face. Although I do think he's still going to struggle that a little bit, so if tanks rush him, he's going to struggle. And like I said, I think Squeak had one of the worst supers in the game, and hopefully this change to his super makes it a little bit better. This change may make it easier to land the little bombs from the super and try to get value from it, which I think happened way too inconsistently. It was way too easy to dodge the super bombs. And if it works out that way, it's also an indirect buff to Super Sticky, because Super Sticky's issue is that bombs never really landed on anyone, so it was hard to get value from it, because when you're not landing the bombs, you're not getting any value from your star power. So overall, I think these are all really good changes. I don't know if he's going to be meta, but I do think Squeak will be a little bit better, and you'll at least be able to play him. All right, now we're going to talk about Jean, because Jean's kind of like in the middle of the nerfs and the buffs. So Jean's Vengeful Spirits damage is getting increased by 200 damage, so now it's going to deal 1,000 damage. His Lamp Blowout's being reworked so that it doesn't heal unless you actually knock a brawler back. And Jean's main attack damage is getting nerfed by 11%. All right, I agree that Jean needed a nerf. He's been pretty dominant for a while. I think the last 2 metas, he's been like a top 5 brawler, both metas. The main attack nerf is a little heavy in my opinion. However, I think Jean's still going to be fine with his main attack, because he's mainly just trying to charge his super and then pull people into bad situations where you can 2-on-1 them or pull them into like your Ike or something like that. And I really like the Lamp Blowout rework, because I don't think that gadget was ever intended to be used as like a burst heal, which a lot of pro players would do. and the knockback on it's still going to be effective. Like when you pull somebody into you, you can knock them back so they can't shoot you right away. So I think the idea behind this is to try to keep the gadget consistent with what they really were intending when they made it. However, I don't think the Vengeful Spirits gadget is going to be any better than what it is right now. I still think it's going to be a trash gadget. My main reason for that is because 1,000 damage is not a lot of damage. I don't know why they think 1,000 damage is a lot of damage for something. We see this with Griff's gadget. Now we have Screeching Solo doing 1,000 damage, and now they want to do this with 1,000 damage. I just think they think 1,000's a lot, and it really doesn't do too much in the grand scheme of things. If you made it something like 12 or 1,300, people would respect Vengeful Spirits. But the problem is that Vengeful Spirits projectiles move way too slow, and they do no damage. So it's like, why even run it? But overall, I like these gene changes. I think the damage is a little heavy, but it is kind of needed, and the lamp blowout is a rework to what it's supposed to be. I don't think Vengeful Spirits is going to be very viable, but that doesn't really matter. All right, moving on to the nerfs. Belle's positive feedback is getting a 5% nerf. So now it's only going to guard 20% of damage instead of 25%. Honestly, Belle's still going to be fine. I don't think people are playing her for her positive feedback. People are playing her because she does good damage, good range, and her slowing trap that can't be triggered unless you step on it. I do think if Mortis comes up in the meta, that's an indirect nerf to Belle, but overall, I think Belle's still going to be fine when Mortis isn't out on the map. Nani's return to sender is now limited to a 5-second duration. This is low-key one of my favorite changes in the balance change because I always thought that it was unfair that she could put up an 80% shield that reflects damage back at the sender for an unlimited amount of time. Now, 5 seconds is still a very long time in game. Just look at Crow's slow gadget because that lasts 5 seconds if you want to feel for that. However, I think it's a little bit better because now there's a play around where if you see the gadget up, you just don't shoot. So it's still going to be a good gadget, but it's just going to have a play around now. Next up, Sandy's Sweet Dreams. The stun is now only going to last 1 second instead of 1.5 seconds. This gadget's still going to be good, but I don't think it's going to be quite as good because now Sandy can't reload a shot while people are stunned. But it's still going to have its uses. It's still going to be able to get Sandy separation when tanks get on top of him. And he's still going to be able to stun people that are in front of the Brawl Ball goal and stuff like that. So it's still going to be a good gadget. It's just not going to be quite as good. Rico's Bouncy Castle now is going to heal 50 less HP per shot. Now it heals 250 instead of 300. This is a nerf that did need to happen. However, I don't understand. If it's still going to heal him up to full HP, what's the point of doing it? Like, the problem was that Rico was able to fully heal HP, so it was really hard to kill him when he was locked down in a certain lane that he could bounce a lot of shots. Maybe if they nerfed it from 300 to 200, I think it would be a little bit better. But as of right now, it's still going to be a really strong gadget, and Rico's still going to dominate in this meta. All right, now we're getting on to the two big nerfs of the balance change, and we're going to start with Primo. Primo is getting nerfed into the ground. They're now making it so that his supercharge from his main attack now takes 16 total attacks instead of 9. And depending on how the tank trait rework ends up working out, I think Primo's going to have a really hard time charging his super, which is a huge nerf to him because all of Primo's strength is in his super. Like, Primo's big strength was being able to jump on people and charging his super very quickly from getting the kills because 3 shots charge his super again, so he could chain supers quickly. So now it's going to take Primo 6 shots to charge his super from empty if he's not getting shot at, which isn't really likely because once you see a Primo jump, you do get focused. But I think that Primo's ability to chain supers the way he was in this last meta is going to be a thing of the past, and I think that's really what made him really good. So once that's gone, I don't think Primo's going to be very viable, and I think he's going to return to a bottom 5 brawler again. And the last nerf that we got to go over is going to be Stu. All right, Stu's breakthrough gadget is now going to require a super to be charged before you can activate it, and the projectiles from it are now going to deal 200 damage instead of 500 damage. And on top of that, Gasa Heal is going to heal 400 HP instead of 500 HP. I'm a fan of these two nerfs personally. I think they're pretty fair. I don't think they overdid it with either one of these nerfs, and I think Stu is still going to be viable, but he just won't be quite as good when you're playing him super aggro because Gasa Heal isn't going to heal you quite as much, and you can't just bust through walls whenever you want. I do think that Breakthrough is still going to be a very good gadget though, because Stu does like to have more open maps, so having the ability to break open walls yourself is still going to be a nice feature for him. And honestly, it's not like Stu has a hard time getting his super in hand, so you still should be able to use all 3 of your gadgets very quickly. And as far as Gasa Heal goes, I think that honestly, it's still going to be a fine star power. They're only nerfing it by 100 HP, so overall, you're only going to lose like 300 healing from it, which isn't really that much in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, these are pretty good changes, especially to the gadget. However, I don't know if they're quite enough to take Stu out of that top brawler position because he's been like the number 1 or 2 brawler since his release. So I won't be surprised if Stu is still a top 5 brawler when this meta settles down, but we'll have to wait and see how that actually works out. So those are all the balance changes, and personally, I think they're pretty decent. I think they did an okay job, and they did address the brawlers that needed to be looked at. Like, Primo got a super heavy nerf, while Squeak got a really good buff. However, I do think they missed the mark on a couple brawlers. Bo and Penny are good examples of missing the mark on buffs, and I think that Belle and Stu, they might have missed the mark on. We'll have to see on those two, but honestly, I won't be shocked if they're still top 5 brawlers. I think my favorite buff is going to go to Mortis. I think that Mortis is going to be really good in this upcoming meta with Creepy Harvest and having Coiled Snake built into his main kit. And I think my favorite nerf is going to be to the one to Nani, because like I said, I never really liked how there was no play around Return to Sender once it was activated. But what do you guys think about these balance changes down below? Do you think that they did a good job? Do you think they missed the mark on a couple? Do you think there's brawlers that got missed entirely, like Jackie? But anyway, that's going to do it for this one. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.